Look closely at this. Every single day, millions of Americans grab one of these for lunch, dinner, or a quick late-night snack. It's sold everywhere, from roadside diners to luxury restaurants and world-famous fast food chains. But pause for a second and ask yourself a question that almost nobody ever brings up. Who actually invented it? In American history, a genuine artifact of unknown origin that defies its own ubiquity. For more than a century, different towns, rival families, and local historical societies have all fought for the title of birthplace of the hamburger. Look at this dense, overlapping text from a 19th century commercial newspaper. When you dig into the archives, you find a chaotic record filled with contradictory claims, lost files, and unverified legends. To find the true origin, we have to look past these American myths and trace the artifact's core component back across the Atlantic. The search begins thousands of miles away, in the busy shadows of an 18th century European port. In the 18th century, Hamburg, Germany was a booming global trading hub, where new ideas and foreign ingredients constantly collided on the docks. One local specialty became the culinary solution for the city's hard-working transient sailors. They simply called it the Hamburg Steak. This was simply seasoned minced beef, shaped into a thick patty and cooked over heat. It was served on a plate, without cheese, ketchup, or a bun. This was pure, utilitarian survival food, heavy, filling fuel designed specifically for laborers and sailors. During the mid-1800s, millions of German immigrants boarded ships like this to begin a perilous crossing to the United States. Most carried very little material wealth, relying instead on recipes and traditions from home to help them survive in a new land. After moving through processing centers like this one, these families spread into rapidly growing, overcrowded cities. Look at these dense street markets. The Hamburg steak soon began appearing in local restaurants and stalls as a cheap meal for the immigrant workforce. Despite crossing an ocean, the dish remained a stationary plate of meat. It still lacked the final spark of invention. Then came the overwhelming acceleration of the American Industrial Revolution. Steel mills and factories began running around the clock. This created a logistical nightmare. Managers had to feed massive workforces moving too fast to sit for a traditional dinner with knife and fork. Someone realized they could solve this by placing the hot beef patty between two slices of bread, creating a fully portable meal. Look at these soot-covered laborers and young workers. They relied on this innovation because it offered the fastest possible fuel for a 12-hour shift. The hamburger functioned as a strict engineering solution to a socio-economic problem, a way to keep the industrial workforce moving. This leads us back to the central mystery. In an era where every minor mechanical part was patented and recorded, why did the person who added the bun remain anonymous? Most famous inventions of the 1880s were tested in laboratories by men with wealthy financial backers. The hamburger had none of those things. The dish was sold in the streets via humble, horse-drawn food carts. Its creators were people far too busy surviving to claim credit in a history book. This lasting anonymity is the inevitable result of an invention created by and for the invisible working class. Over time, this survival food evolved from a street cart snack into a neon-lit cultural icon. Every time you eat a hamburger today, you are participating in a direct lineage of immigrant ingenuity and industrial-era endurance. The dish stands as an edible, everyday monument to the millions of ordinary people whose labor and necessity shaped the way we live. It makes you wonder, what other world-changing inventions were created by anonymous hands that history simply forgot to name? When raw ground beef hits the iron, it triggers a reaction that has defined American dining for over a century, but the architect of that decision is missing from the record. The sandwich is now a cultural monolith, the center of a multi-billion-dollar industry and a staple of the national diet. Yet ask any historian for a name, and they cannot give you one. There is no single person credited with the invention. We have no original patents, no photos of the first sale, and no definitive primary documents. The most recognizable food on the planet remains an unsolved mystery, hidden behind a century of local legends. In the late 1800s, massive public gatherings became the testing grounds for food innovation. As thousands of people flooded agricultural fairs, cooks had to solve a new problem: how to feed a crowd that refused to stop moving. In 1885, a 15-year-old vendor in Seymour, Wisconsin, named Charlie Magreen, found himself with a surplus of meatballs that no one wanted to buy. The issue was logistical. Customers wanted to see the attractions, and they couldn't do that while holding a plate and a fork. By flattening the meat and placing it between slices of bread, Magreen created a meal matching the constant motion of the fairground. During that same decade in Athens, Texas, cafe owner Fletcher Davis reportedly served a similar grilled patty on bread to his local customers. Legend suggests Davis brought his recipe to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, helping a regional idea find a national audience. Both accounts offer a logical explanation for the sandwich's birth, but neither possesses the contemporary paperwork required to settle the matter. Other accounts focus on how the sandwich earned its specific name, tracing a trail through the Northeast. In Hamburg, New York, the theory is one of gradual evolution, where the Hamburg Steak was slowly adapted into a portable format for travelers passing through the region. But in 1885, at a Cali fair in Akron, Ohio, Demench's brothers claimed a different origin. They ran out of pork for their sausage sandwiches and needed an immediate replacement to keep their stall running. This logistical challenge of the era's supply chain forced them to substitute ground beef from Hamburg, New York, naming the sandwich after the town. While these stories explain why we call it a hamburger, the specific details remain impossible for historians to verify a century later. Not every claim comes from a crowded fairground. In New Haven, Connecticut, at a small restaurant called Louie's Lunch, the story is far more personal. Around 1900, a busy customer reportedly asked for a meal he could take with him. The cook placed grilled beef between 2 slices of toast, creating a quick solution for a person on the move. Despite these distinct accounts from across the country, the trail ends there. No single story can be proven. Historians require primary source proof: ledgers, receipts, or contemporary business records. But for the hamburger, those records do not exist. We have no diary entries from the 1880s describing the first patty, and no business licenses that mention the sandwich by name during its supposed infancy. The journalism of the era provides no help. Reporters meticulously recorded the political speeches and state funerals of the day, but they ignored the street-level vendors who were changing the way the country ate. History records the actions of the powerful, but it frequently loses the origins of the everyday things that define a culture. The absence of a single inventor reflects the reality of the era. These stories from Wisconsin, Texas, and Connecticut show that the same pressures, the nationwide need for speed, and the specific logistical hurdles of the beef supply forced cooks in different states to independently arrive at the identical solution. The true creator is a ghost, hidden by a culture that was changing too fast for the record keepers to keep up. Based on the evidence from these 5 towns, you have to decide for yourself which account holds the most weight. The hamburger belongs to the collective culture that demanded its existence. Every single day, billions of hamburgers are consumed across the globe, yet the identity of the person who invented it remains a complete blank. To find this missing architect, we have to trace the corporate machinery of the fast food empire backward. Our search begins in the early 1900s, long before this sandwich became an inescapable global icon. The hamburger evolved as a technological survivor, adapting to meet the specific anxieties of a rapidly industrializing society. American cities were swelling with new arrivals. Factories were hiring thousands of laborers who had strict schedules and very little money, creating an immediate demand for a meal that was filling, cheap, and fast. The turning point arrived at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. Over the course of the event, nearly 20 million visitors walked through these grounds, exposing countless Americans to the concept of minced meat served between 2 slices of bread. But the sandwich faced a severe problem. The public actively distrusted ground beef. Newspapers were consistently publishing reports detailing the grim, unsanitary conditions inside American meatpacking plants. Consumers were terrified of what might actually be hidden inside minced meat. Trapped in this vacuum of public trust, the sandwich could not grow. For it to survive, the next major innovation would have to solve a psychological problem rather than a culinary one. That solution arrived in 1921 in Wichita, Kansas. 2 entrepreneurs named Walter Anderson and Billy Ingram opened a small restaurant they called White Castle. They aggressively targeted the public's anxiety. Their strategy was to paint their buildings of bright, stark white, projecting an aura of absolute hospital-grade purity. Inside, they enforced strict operational transparency. The grills were placed right in front of the customers, so anyone could watch their meal being prepared. Every single burger looked and tasted exactly the same. Measured, observant. This strict visual consistency worked. Faced with a reliable, brightly lit environment, diners finally viewed the minced meat as a safe, dependable commodity. White Castle had not invented the recipe. Instead, they had successfully engineered the public's permission to eat it. By the late 1940s, the country had shifted again. Post-war America was defined by the automobile, and citizens wanted to move quickly. Traditional restaurants, however, were too slow to match this new pace. In California, brothers Richard and Maurice McDonald found the answer. They stopped treating their kitchen like a restaurant and redesigned it to function identically to an industrial factory floor. Looking at the schematic of their new kitchen layout, the division of labor is stark. Every worker was assigned a single, isolated task. One person only flipped patties, another only applied toppings. The sandwich moved continuously through these zones without stopping. Because of this unbroken assembly line, preparation times plummeted from over 20 minutes to a matter of seconds. This mechanized choreography caught the attention of a businessman named Ray Kroc, who saw a system that could be replicated endlessly across the globe. By stripping the human element away from the cooking process and replacing it with strict automation, the hamburger became the ultimate standardized product. The corporate timeline of this expansion is rigorously documented. We know exactly when the supply chains formed and how the kitchens were optimized. Yet, the identity of the person who actually put the very first patty between two buns is completely absent from the record. When you search for that original creator, the facts shatter into dozens of competing claims, local myths, and undocumented family legends. Billions of these meals are sold every year, but the specific architect who designed it simply does not exist in the definitive historical record. The history of this sandwich shows that massive cultural icons are rarely the result of a single moment of genius. They are built piecemeal, assembled from the scattered, forgotten ideas of an entire era. The suspect street food of the past was sterilized, mechanized, and scaled until it became a flawless symbol of speed and predictability. This story suggests that even the most common objects can carry a past built on forgotten records and competing legends. The hamburger is a mirror reflecting a century of relentless reinvention. Taking a bite out of one means consuming a piece of an unsolved history.